What if I told you that the world's largest lake is actually a salty puddle left over from an ancient ocean? Or that if you stand on its sun-baked shores, you're actually standing nearly 100 feet below sea level? From the birthplace of the global oil boom to a highly contested five-nation border, welcome to the Caspian Sea, a massive landlocked body of water that acts more like an ocean. The Caspian Sea represents one of the most fascinating geographic identity crises on Earth. Is it a lake or is it a sea? Spanning over 371,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Japan, it easily holds the title of the world's largest inland body of water. Geographically speaking, because it is entirely landlocked and cut off from the global ocean system, modern definitions classify it as the world's largest lake. However, its historic title as a sea is more than just an ancient misnomer. The Romans, noticing its distinctly salty water, dubbed it a sea. Furthermore, unlike typical lakes that sit entirely on continental crust, the southern portion of the Caspian rests on ancient oceanic crust. This dual nature makes it a geologic anomaly. It possesses the vast scale and sailing characteristics of a sea, yet remains permanently imprisoned within the heart of the Eurasian landmass as a colossal lake. To understand the Caspian Sea's unique environment, you have to understand the concept of an endorheic basin. This means it's a completely closed drainage system with no natural outflows to the global oceans. Water flows in, but it never flows out except through evaporation. The lifeblood of this massive basin is a network of over 130 rivers. But none is more important than Russia's mighty Volga River. The Volga alone contributes approximately 80% of the fresh water flowing into the Caspian, with other significant contributors including the Ural and Kura rivers. Because evaporation is the only exit strategy for the water, the sea acts as a giant basin collecting whatever the rivers bring. This delicate balance between river inflow and intense evaporation under the Central Asian sun dictates everything from the sea's fluctuating water levels to its complex chemical composition, making it highly sensitive to climatic changes upstream. Standing on the sun-baked shores of the Caspian Sea, you might feel like you're at the edge of an ocean, but you're actually experiencing a massive global depression. The surface of the Caspian Sea and its surrounding shores sits at a staggering elevation of approximately 28 meters or about 92 feet below the global ocean level. This makes the Caspian Depression one of the lowest landmasses on Earth. If a massive channel were ever carved connecting the Caspian to the Black Sea, oceanic waters would rush in, catastrophically flooding thousands of square miles of coastal territory in Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Iran, and Azerbaijan. The sea's elevation isn't static either. Throughout history, the water level has fluctuated wildly depending on tectonic shifts, the flow of the Volga River, and evaporation rates, occasionally rising to flood shallow coastal settlements and then retreating to leave behind vast salty deserts. Unlike the uniform saltiness of the open ocean, the Caspian Sea features a bizarre and dramatic salinity gradient that changes depending on where you swim. On average, the Caspian is brackish, containing only about a third of the salt found in seawater. However, in the shallow northern basin, where the massive Volga River dumps millions of gallons of fresh water, the water is practically fresh, capable of supporting freshwater fish, and even freezing over completely during harsh winters. But as you travel southward towards Iran, the sea deepens and the water becomes significantly more saline. The most extreme example of this is the Garabogazkal Lagoon on the coast of Turkmenistan. Water flows from the Caspian into this lagoon and rapidly evaporates, leaving behind a hypersaline bowl that is one of the saltiest bodies of water on the planet, starkly contrasting the fresh northern waters. Millions of years of strict geographic isolation have turned the Caspian Sea into a remarkable evolutionary laboratory, resulting in a highly unique ecosystem packed with endemic species found nowhere else on Earth. Because it was severed from the global oceans, its marine life had to adapt to changing salinity levels and a completely enclosed environment. The absolute crown jewel of this unique biodiversity is the Caspian seal. It's one of the only seal species in the entire world that lives its entire life in an inland brackish body of water. Every winter, these resilient mammals migrate to the freezing, ice-covered waters of the northern Caspian to give birth and raise their pups. Alongside the seal, the sea is home to specialized mollusks, unique sponges, and ancient fish species, proving that life can brilliantly adapt and thrive even when permanently cut off from the rest of the planet's oceans. Now, speaking of that geographic isolation, the Caspian Sea wasn't always a landlocked anomaly. It's essentially a giant puddle left over from a colossal ancient ocean. Around 30 million years ago, a massive body of water known as the Paratethys Sea stretched from the modern-day Alps all the way across Central Asia. It connected the areas we now know as the Mediterranean, Black, Caspian, and Aral Seas. However, our planet's surface is constantly moving. As tectonic plates shifted, the African and Arabian plates relentlessly pushed northward, colliding with the massive Eurasian plate. This slow-motion collision forced the land to buckle and rise, creating towering mountain ranges like the Caucasus and the Alborz. These newly formed mountains acted as an impenetrable dam, gradually slicing the Paratethys Sea into smaller pieces. By about 5.5 million years ago, the Caspian Sea was entirely severed from the global ocean system, trapping ancient seawater deep inland. Have you ever wondered where the Caspian Sea actually got its name? It stems from a world of ancient human geography, specifically a mysterious ancient nomadic tribe known as the Caspi, or Caspians. During antiquity, this group inhabited the sea's southwestern shores in the Transcaucasia region, likely in areas corresponding to modern-day Azerbaijan and northern Iran. Greek historians like Herodotus and Strabo wrote about the Caspians, noting their presence in the sprawling Achaemenid Persian Empire. They were often described as fierce warriors and skilled equestrians who lived a harsh, nomadic lifestyle along the coastal plains and mountains. While the Caspian people eventually assimilated into other surrounding cultures and faded from historical records, their legacy was immortalized by the Greco-Roman mapmakers who named the massive uncharted waters they lived beside the Mare Caspium. Today, this ancient tribe's name is spoken daily across the globe. Long before modern container ships or airplanes, the Caspian Sea was both a massive geographic obstacle and an indispensable commercial hub on the ancient Silk Road. For centuries, merchants moving precious goods like silk from China, spices from India, and glassware from Europe had to navigate the immense Eurasian landmass. When caravans reached the vast expanse of the Caspian, they faced a choice: undertake a dangerous, grueling overland trek through the harsh northern steppes, or use the sea itself. Enterprising sailors and merchants turned the Caspian into a bustling maritime highway. Coastal cities like Derbent in modern Russia, Baku in Azerbaijan, and various Persian ports flourished as wealthy centers of cross-cultural exchange. Goods were transferred from camels to ships, sailing across the waters before continuing their journey west or east. This transformed the Caspian from a barrier into a vital bridge connecting the economies of the East and West. When most people think of the birthplace of the modern oil boom, they imagine Texas or the Middle East. Surprisingly, the true pioneer of the global petroleum industry was the Caspian Sea, specifically the shores of modern-day Azerbaijan. For centuries, locals had known about burning mountains and surface oil seeps, using the black liquid for medicine and heating. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Baku transformed into an industrial powerhouse supported by investments from the Nobel brothers and Rothschilds. By 1900, Baku produced more than half of the world's crude oil. The industry soon moved from the shoreline onto reclaimed land and wooden piers in the shallow waters. Eventually, this expansion culminated in the construction of Neft Dashlari in 1949, recognized as the world's first true offshore oil platform out of sight of land, forever altering the region's economic geography. For the vast majority of the 20th century, the political geography of the Caspian Sea was remarkably straightforward. The entire coastline was controlled by just two sovereign countries, the Soviet Union and Iran. These powers managed the sea, its navigation, and fishing rights through a series of clear bilateral treaties. However, the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 acted as a massive geopolitical earthquake. Overnight, the Soviet coastline fractured, giving birth to three newly independent nations: Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Azerbaijan, alongside the Russian Federation, which emerged globally, recognized as the legal successor state to the USSR. Suddenly, the two-nation basin became a crowded five-nation border. The old treaties became highly contested, throwing the region into diplomatic chaos. With vast offshore oil and gas reserves at stake, the coastal states entered into decades of intense negotiations over how to draw maritime borders and divide the incredible wealth. Today, the human and political geography of the Caspian Sea is defined by its division among five distinct sovereign countries, making it one of the most geopolitically complex bodies of water on Earth. Starting in the northwest and moving clockwise, the coastline is shared by the Russian Federation, the massive Central Asian steppe nation of Kazakhstan, the Desert Republic of Turkmenistan, the Islamic Republic of Iran to the south, and the Caucasus nation of Azerbaijan to the southwest. Each of these five countries brings different economic priorities, cultural backgrounds, and political alliances to the shore. Because the sea is totally enclosed, these countries are forced into an intimate geopolitical marriage. They must collectively manage maritime trade routes, military naval presence, fragile environmental ecosystems, and the exploitation of immensely lucrative offshore hydrocarbon reserves. A decision or an environmental disaster in one country's sector inevitably affects the waters and shores of the other four. The discovery of massive oil reserves under the Caspian marked a 20-year legal war over a crucial question: is it a sea or a lake? If classified as a sea, it would fall under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, granting specific territorial waters. Iran often argued for a lake classification, pushing for an equal 20% resource split, though international law has no strict blanket rule for dividing lakes. In 2018, the five states compromised by signing the Convention on the Legal Status of the Caspian Sea, creating a Frankenstein framework that classified it as neither. Surface waters are treated largely like a sea, allowing freedom of navigation beyond designated territorial zones. Conversely, the lucrative seabed was left to be divided through complex bilateral and trilateral agreements between adjacent states, typically based on the length of their respective coastlines rather than equal proportional shares. The Caspian Sea is synonymous with the ultimate symbol of culinary luxury: beluga caviar. This enclosed basin is the native habitat of the beluga sturgeon, a massive prehistoric fish that can live for over a century and grow to the size of a small car. The unfertilized eggs of this ancient leviathan are harvested to produce the world's most expensive and highly prized caviar, driving a multi-million-dollar regional economy. However, the human impact on this species has been devastating. Decades of rampant overfishing, lucrative black market poaching, and the damming of the Volga River pushed the beluga sturgeon to the absolute brink of extinction. Today, the caviar economy has been forced to shift drastically. Strict international export quotas have been implemented, and massive investments are being poured into sustainable aquaculture and hatcheries in a desperate bid to save this prehistoric giant from disappearing forever. The modern human geography of the Caspian Sea is visibly dominated by the energy sector. Beneath its salty waves lie staggering reserves of fossil fuels. According to the US Energy Information Administration, the broader Caspian Basin holds an estimated 48 billion barrels of oil and 292 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. The offshore reserves alone account for roughly 19.6 billion barrels of oil and 106 trillion cubic feet of gas. Unlocking this underwater wealth has transformed the seascape into an industrial frontier. Massive steel offshore drilling rigs dot the horizon, particularly off the coast of Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. In the shallow, freezing waters of the northern Caspian, companies have gone to extremes to extract these resources. Kazakhstan's Kashagan oil field required the construction of massive artificial islands to support drilling equipment and protect it from crushing winter ice flows. These sprawling industrial complexes drive coastal economies but constantly threaten the enclosed basin. The Caspian Sea is currently facing an existential crisis driven by human-induced climate change and resource mismanagement. Because it's an enclosed basin, its water levels rely on a fragile balance between river inflow and evaporation, and this balance is failing. Rising global temperatures are causing the sea to evaporate at an accelerating, unprecedented rate. Simultaneously, the mighty Volga River, which provides 80% of the sea's water, is suffering from reduced rainfall and intensive damming for human agriculture and hydroelectric power. The result is a rapidly shrinking sea. The water level is dropping by several centimeters every year, leaving boats stranded in mud and coastal towns miles from the shore. Scientists project a grim future. If current warming trends and water diversion practices continue, the Caspian Sea could lose up to 30% of its surface area by the end of the century, devastating local economies, shipping routes, and unique ecosystems. So, after learning all of this, what do you think? Is it a lake or an actual sea? One thing is certain, the Caspian Sea is neither fully one nor the other. It is a geographic anomaly, a colossal inland body of salt water that carries the memory of ancient oceans, the weight of modern geopolitics, and the fragile hope of unique life forms struggling to survive in a rapidly changing world.